Don't save me. The cry rattled the night like a ghost's plea, sharp and broken, carried on the desert wind. Jonas Mercer halted his horse on the canyon trail, reins tightening in his scarred hand. Below, a campfire burned low, its light spilling across red stone and thorn brush. Around it, shadows shifted. Men hunched, grinning, their boots planted firm. At their feet lay a burlap sack, writhing like a trapped animal. Dust swirled against the firelight, and from inside came that voice again, muffled, raw with desperation. Don't save me. Would you have ridden on? Would you have spurred your horse into the dark, and let another soul's torment pass, like so many others had before? Jonas sat still in the saddle, the desert air dry against his face. His chest tightened with a familiar ache, that old wound no bullet could carve. He had buried his wife on land that gave him nothing but stone. She had died birthing a child that never drew breath. The preacher he once was had been laid in that same grave, left behind with the hymns and prayers he could no longer believe in. What remained was a widowed rancher, drifting through miles of emptiness, as if the horizon itself might one day offer forgiveness. The gulch below stretched barren and cruel. Coyotes yipped in the far distance, their cries a reminder of how quick the strong fed on the weak. The sandstone blushed with the last shimmer of daylight, jagged cliffs carving long shadows across the earth. Jonas touched the brim of his hat, lowering it against the glow of the rider's fire, watching. His silence was a cloak, but beneath it lay guilt sharp enough to bleed him every night. Perhaps that was why his eyes fixed on the sack. He had no business there, yet something in the desperate thrashing hooked into his marrow. 5 men circled the fire. They weren't outlaws in the common sense, no ragged drunks, no dust-beaten desperados. These were mercenaries, hard-eyed and sharp-toothed, the kind of men who didn't steal for hunger but for contracts, coin, and the cruel pleasure of it. Their coats were worn but trimmed, rifles polished, boots clean despite the dust. Jonas had heard whispers of them in towns between here and the Brazos, the Black Hollow Riders. Men who did not ask why, only how much. They sold captives the way cattlemen sold stock, alive when possible, bones when not. At their center leaned Rafe Caro, their leader. He wore a gambler's coat stitched black, silver buttons catching the firelight, his hair slicked back, his mustache waxed into points like fangs. He was not loud, but his smile commanded silence when it curled. He tapped the ash from a cigar, voice smooth as whiskey as he drawled. Worth more alive than bones, this one. Ain't that right, boys? Laughter rose. One of them kicked the sack, and it bucked, a muffled cry spilling from within. Jonas' jaw clenched. His grip tightened on the reins until the leather creaked. He could ride on, pretend he saw nothing, but the cry replayed, digging deeper. Would you risk your life for a stranger's fate? Jonas dismounted in silence, tethered his horse behind rock, and began the slow descent. His boots scraped shale, his body a shadow against the canyon's skin. When he stepped into the circle of firelight, he carried himself like a man who belonged, hat low, shoulders squared, a rancher passing through. The riders tensed. Hands twitched near holsters, eyes narrowed. "Evenin'," Jonas said, voice calm as still water. The riders traded glances. Rafe tilted his head, studying Jonas as though weighing the worth of his very soul. "Evenin', stranger. Hell of a night to be wandering canyons. Where you riding from?" Jonas lowered onto a rock near the fire as though it were his own. "North pasture. Fences cut. Been tracking strays half the day." He pulled his canteen, drank slow, steady. His eyes flicked, just once, toward the sack. It twitched again, unmistakably human. One of the riders snorted. "Ain't no pasture out here. Just rockin' bones." Jonas met his gaze, without blinking. Strays don't know boundaries. Suspicion rippled through the camp. Rafe watched him like a man watches a card sharp, expecting the bluff, waiting for the reveal. Then he smiled wide, offered a bottle. Whiskey, smooth as the devil's tongue. Jonas shook his head. "I don't drink." That drew laughter, sharp and mocking. One spat into the dirt. Listen to him. Got a preacher's manners. The words sank heavy. Jonas did not move, did not show the stir in his chest, But Rafe leaned closer, smoke curling from his lips. Funny thing, a man who won't drink, who carries himself like the good Lord's still peering over his shoulder. You sure you're just a rancher? Jonas said nothing. Silence was safer than lies, though both were dangerous tonight. He kept his eyes on the flames, though his ears stayed sharp on the sack. The faintest whisper carried through the burlap, so soft only he seemed to hear. Don't save me. The riders roared in laughter at some crude jest, but Jonas' hand found its way near his holster. Not from fear, from recognition. That voice wasn't a stranger's. It was a wound torn open. His chest tightened like a noose around his ribs. The fire cracked, embers spitting into the black sky. Coyotes called again, closer now. Night deepened, pressing down with a suffocating weight. Rafe stretched long and lazy, knife glinting in his hand as he cut at a strip of beef jerky. You'll stay a while, friend. Roads ain't safe alone. We'll share the fire, share the night. Jonas nodded, though every muscle in him screamed to flee. The sack shifted again, a faint struggle. Then the voice came clearer, ragged but unmistakable. Jonas, don't save me. The world seemed to stop. His pulse pounded loud in his ears. His hand shook over the revolver at his hip, not from weakness, but from memory, from the echo of a past he had buried deep beneath grief and silence. And so I ask you, what would you do if the past you swore dead was crying out from inside a sack at your enemy's feet? Would you walk away, or would you draw? The fire hissed low as grease dripped into the coals, and Jonas felt every eye on him as if the flames themselves were interrogators. One rider pushed a tin cup into his hand, and he let the whiskey slosh without drinking, feigning the ease of a man with nothing to hide. North pasture, he said again when they pressed him. Strays don't rope themselves. The riders grinned wolfish, knowing men who smelled fear. Rafe Caro leaned forward, cigar glowing like the last ember in hell. We don't chase strays. We collect debts. Makes for richer business. He gestured with the blade of his knife toward the sack. This one owed a man plenty. Now we're the messengers, paid in coin for carrying the weight. The sack twitched, jerking against the dirt. Jonas froze as dark spots blossomed through the burlap, spreading like ink. Blood. He tightened his jaw, looking away before the riders could read his reaction. Debts, one said, chewing tobacco with a wet spit. Every man's got him. Some pay. Some get carried. They laughed. The sound was hollow as the canyon itself. Jonas forced himself to lean back, boots stretched toward the fire, his face carved in calm. Inside his chest the ache deepened. Coyotes sang closer now, their chorus riding the wind. He had debts too. Debts he thought buried with his pulpit and his past. Then came the whisper again, faint through canvas and blood. Jonas, it's me. The words snapped like a whip across his skull. He stiffened, his hand faltering against the tin cup. He stared at the sack, as though it had spoken in a voice of the dead. Could it be? He tried to swallow, but his throat locked tight. A memory clawed up, faces in the pews, prayers spilling out. A congregation he'd left behind when guilt drove him to the barren ranch. And among them, one face, one voice he had failed to defend when rumors spread like wildfire. He drew a slow breath, prayed the riders hadn't noticed the shift in his eyes. But Rafe had. The leader's grin widened, sharp and knowing. A younger rider moved toward the sack, eager fingers reaching for the twine. Let's have a look, he chuckled. Two others blocked him, gruff and snarling. Don't be a fool. Orders are to deliver, not sample. The tension flared like sparks on the coals. Jonas seized the moment, his voice cool, almost mocking. Strange thing, keeping something alive without knowing its worth. You boys sure you're not carrying death instead of coin? The camp stilled. All eyes turned. Rafe studied him long, then chuckled, low and bitter. You sound like a man who's carried death plenty. He leaned closer, his gaze cutting like a blade. Funny how you quit preaching, yet the guilt still rides your shoulders. I see it in your eyes. Jonas didn't flinch. He met the stare, though the firelight betrayed the faintest tremor in his jaw. Would you confess who you are to men like these? Or would you lie and keep your breath one more hour? The riders laughed, but not kindly. The night pressed close, heavy with smoke and suspicion. Then the sack jerked again, hard, a muffled groan spilling into the dirt. One rider kicked it and sneered. "Shut up." That was the spark. Jonas was on his feet before thought could stop him, fist snapping across the man's jaw. The rider reeled, spitting blood into the fire. Chaos erupted. Hands flew to guns, shouts splitting the canyon air. Jonas drew, iron flashing, the first shot cracking like thunder. Horses screamed, bolting into the dark. Gunfire tore the night. Jonas dropped behind a rock, firing quick, precise, each bullet singing through smoke. One rider fell clutching his chest. Another cursed and staggered as lead burned his arm. Rafe bellowed orders, teeth bared in rage. Jonas lunged for the sack, slashing ropes with a rider's own dropped knife. Canvas tore, and out spilled a figure, bound and bleeding. Her face lifted into firelight, and Jonas staggered back as if struck by lightning. Etta Lee, her eyes, wild and bruised, locked on his. Once she had sat in his pews. Once she had sung hymns he preached. Then the town had cast her out, branded her a liar, a temptress, a betrayer. Jonas had not defended her. He had turned away. Now here she was, bound like an animal at the feet of killers. "No," she rasped, voice raw as gravel. "Don't save me." Jonas cut the last rope from her wrists, but she shoved him back, fear greater than gratitude. Her gaze darted to the sack, half-split, something heavier still inside. Jonas reached, his hand trembling. "Don't," she hissed. "You don't understand." But he tore the burlap wider. His breath caught, blood roaring in his ears. Nestled against the torn cloth, pale and silent, was a child. Eyes closed, lips blue, too still for comfort. Across the small chest lay a mark dark as ash, curling like a brand. Jonas felt the earth tilt beneath him. His hand shook, revolver slack at his side. He stared at the boy, recognition flooding like poison. This was no nameless child. This was something bound to a truth he thought he had buried with his sermons. And so I ask you, would you believe the child was cursed or chosen? The night tore open with gunfire, and then there was only thunder of hooves and the ragged breath of flight. Jonas rode hard, Etta clinging behind him, the sack pressed tight to her chest. The riders thundered after, their shouts carried on the wind like wolves in chase. A storm brewed on the horizon, clouds rolling black over the mesas, lightning streaking the dark in jagged veins. Dust rose in choking plumes, the land itself trembling under the weight of pursuit. "Turn back!" Etta cried against the wind, her nails dug into his coat. "Don't protect me. You don't know what you're saving." Jonas leaned low in the saddle, jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead. "I know enough." "You don't." Her voice cracked, breaking beneath the roar of the storm. "The child is dangerous. He'll curse you same as he's cursed me." But Jonas only pressed harder, heels to the gelding's flanks, the canyon mouth looming ahead. Lightning lit the sandstone walls, painting their escape in white fire. Behind, Rafe's voice bellowed commands, the riders closing the gap. Rain began to fall, fat drops sizzling against hot rock, the scent of iron in the air. They broke from the gulch into the open desert, storm winds clawing at them, and for a breath it seemed they might outrun death itself. Yet Etta's sob carried between claps of thunder. "You don't understand, Jonas. This boy, he isn't meant to live free." Her words haunted him even as he drove the horse deeper into the storm's heart. They found cover hours later, the rider's pursuit blunted by rain and broken ground. Jonas pulled the horse beneath a rock ledge, chest heaving, water dripping from his hat brim. Etta slid down, clutching the child close, her face pale and drawn. "I should have died with him," she whispered. "That would have been mercy." Jonas crouched, eyes searching hers. "Why?" She swallowed hard, rain tracing mud down her cheek. "Because once I believed. I believed your sermons, your promises of salvation. I thought I was seen. But when the whispers came, that I consorted with outlaws, that I was sin walking, no one defended me. Not even you." Her gaze burned him like a brand. Jonas felt the sting of old guilt rising. He'd turned away when she needed him most, burying himself in his own grief. Her voice dropped, hoarse. "This child is mine." But his father was no outlaw, not really. His father was witness to a land baron's theft. He carved proof into the boy's very skin before he was killed. That mark you saw, it's not curse nor blessing. It's truth. The riders don't serve the law. They serve the man who fears being unmasked. Jonah's stomach sank. Not bounty hunters, then. Shadows of a ranching tycoon. Men bought to erase the last living evidence of his crimes. Thunder rolled above, and Jonah stood, staring out into the darkened desert. They'll hunt him till he's ash. Etta nodded, clutching the boy tighter. That's why I begged not to be saved. Everyone who tries ends up dead. The storm passed with dawn still hours away. They pressed on, winding through canyons scarred by centuries of wind, every echo a threat. The riders were cunning. Jonas could feel them circling, patient as vultures. He led Etta through a narrow pass, sandstone walls close on both sides, his revolver drawn. The ambush came swift, bullets sparking off rock, the crack of rifles filling the gorge. Jonas shoved Etta down, firing back, shots ricocheting, horses screaming. A slug grazed his arm, searing hot. He dropped low, rolling behind stone, returning fire with measured calm. He'd fought before, but this was different. He fought for more than himself. The horse screamed as a bullet struck its flank, collapsing in the dust. Jonas cursed, dragging Etta and the child clear. The riders pressed hard, forcing them up the pass, their laughter echoing. Jonas studied the land with desperate eyes, then saw it, a shelf of rock loosened by rain. He fired into it, each bullet cracking stone until it gave way. The ledge crashed down, dust exploding, cutting off the riders long enough to flee. They stumbled into a cave high on the ridge, shadows swallowing them whole. Jonas lit a small fire with trembling hands, the flame flickering against damp stone. Etta sat close, hair matted, her arms wrapped around the boy as though he were both anchor and curse. "You don't understand," she said again, voice hollow. "I begged you not to save me because anyone near me dies. It's the pattern of my life. You should have left me in that sack." Jonas stared at the fire, jaw tight. "And what kind of man would I be then?" She looked at him, eyes hollow. Alive. The silence stretched heavy between them. Finally Jonas spoke, his voice rough with years of silence. "I was a preacher once. Stood on boards and promised hope. But when my wife labored, I prayed till my knees bled and no mercy came. She died, and the child never drew breath. I buried them both and buried my faith with them. I left the pulpit for cattle and dust, thinking I could outpace the guilt." He turned to her, eyes weary but sharp. "But guilt follows, just as riders do. And now here I sit, with the past staring me in the face, asking me if I'll turn away again." The fire cracked, shadows dancing. Jonas' words hung heavy in the cave. "And I ask you, if redemption knocked twice on your door, would you open it?" The night passed restless, each sound outside a threat, each flicker of firelight a reminder of the riders circling closer. When dawn broke pale across the desert, Jonas stepped to the cave's mouth, revolver heavy in his grip. Figures moved in the mist below, dark riders, spreading out, encircling the ridge. Rafe's voice carried up, smooth and cold. "Jonas Mercer. Preacher. Rancher. Whatever you call yourself now. No use hiding. Hand over the woman and the boy. We'll make your death a quicker one." Jonas' hand clenched tighter around the revolver. Behind him, Etta stirred. The child, silent all night, shifted in her arms. His small lips parted, breath faint, and in a voice barely more than a sigh, he whispered words no one else could know. Words Jonas himself had preached long ago in another life. A prayer of hope, soft and steady, rising like dawn. Jonas' blood ran cold. The riders closed in. The boy prayed. And the storm was far from over. The canyon rim burned with pale light as dawn crept across the stones. Below, the Black Hollow riders fanned wide, rifles gleaming, horses snorting mist into the chill air. Their laughter rose up the walls, cruel and confident, like men who had never yet failed to close their circle. Jonas stood at the cave mouth, revolver steady, his breath calm though his veins burned fire. Etta crouched behind him. The child pressed tight to her chest, her eyes wild with fear and defiance. Rafe Caro rode forward, black coat rippling in the breeze, his cigar glowing like a coal in the growing light. "Mercer," he called, his voice carrying smooth as a snake's hiss. "Give us the woman and the brat, and you'll ride free. You've no stake in this. Take your horse and live." Jonas' reply cut sharp. "My life was buried long ago. All that's left is the truth." Rafe tilted his head, amusement flickering. "And who are you to speak of truth?" Jonas stepped out onto the ledge, light striking his worn face, the revolver low but ready. His voice rose steady, carrying into every ear. "Once, they called me the preacher of Deadwood Gulch, a man who promised salvation. But salvation's just a word until you're willing to bleed for it." The riders stirred, murmurs running through them like wind through dry grass. Some had heard the name before, a ghost from the past, thought long dead. Rafe's grin faltered, then hardened, and he raised his hand. "Then you'll bleed first." The world exploded. Gunfire ripped the canyon apart, echoing like thunder on stone. Bullets sparked off rock, tore through dust, and screamed into flesh. Jonas moved with the precision of a man unburdened by fear. Every shot measured, every draw deliberate. His lips moved, not in curses but in scripture, each verse falling like a death chant. "The wages of sin is death, the Lord is my strength, the truth shall make you free." Each word became a rhythm to his fire, each breath a sermon of steel. Etta huddled near the cave mouth, shielding the boy with her own body. A rider charged too close, revolver raised, and she seized a stone from the earth, hurling it with desperate force. It struck his brow, knocking him from the saddle. Another lunged on foot, and she snatched a burning brand from the fire, striking hard, flames licking his coat as he staggered back with a scream. The battle raged fierce, dust rising into a storm of blood and grit. Jonas moved among the rocks, his dark coat a shadow, his eyes cold fire. He dropped one rider, then another, his body carrying scars, yet refusing surrender. But no man walks untouched through lead. A rifle cracked from the ridge, and pain tore his side, hot and wet. Jonas fell to a knee, vision swimming, but his hand still held the revolver firm. Rafe's voice cut through the chaos. "You'd burn the earth for a lie." He spurred his horse forward, shooting wild. Jonas steadied, blood soaking his shirt, and fired. The bullet struck Rafe across the shoulder, spinning him in the saddle, his grin replaced by a snarl of pain. The canyon grew still in that breath between storms, body sprawled, dust heavy, horses screaming in fear. Jonas, swaying, forced himself to his feet. His chest heaved, but his voice still carried. "Would you spill blood?" he asked, eyes sweeping the survivors, "to protect a truth that could burn this frontier clean?" No answer came but the echo of wind through stone. Rafe dismounted, staggering, his pistol raised with trembling hand. His face was pale, lips tight with rage, and something close to fear. "That boy," he growled, "ain't yours to keep. He's the heir to stolen land my master bled men to take. That mark on his chest, proof of a deed that strips an empire bare. You think you're saving him? You're digging your own grave." Jonas tossed his revolver aside, chest rising heavy. "Then come dig it yourself." The two men closed, fists in fury, dust choking around them. Jonas struck first, his blow landing hard, but Rafe countered with a knife flashing silver. They grappled in the dirt, blood smearing the stones, teeth gritted. Jonas' side burned with each movement, his strength waning, yet something deeper drove him, something beyond flesh. He remembered his wife's last breath, the child that never cried, the sermons left unfinished, all the lives he failed to protect. Not this one, not now. He wrenched the blade from Rafe's hand and drove him down into the dust, his knee pressing the gambler's chest, his fist raised for the killing strike. Silence fell across the canyon, every eye fixed on the moment. But Jonas stopped. His hand trembled in the air, then fell. He rose, bleeding and broken, and looked down at Rafe with eyes colder than death. "You'll live, and every man here will know you were beaten and spared by the man you mocked. That shame will ride with you longer than any wound." Rafe gasped in the dirt, his men looking on with hollow eyes. The circle broke. One by one, they turned away, mounts spurring into the open desert, leaving their leader bleeding in the dust. Etta knelt, clutching the child. Tears streaked her dirt-stained face as she looked up at Jonas. He staggered, his frame bent but unbroken, and removed his hat with shaking hands. He set it gently on the boy's head, his voice rough but steady. "This land remembers truth." The sun rose higher, spilling gold across the stones, painting blood and shadow into legend. Jonas mounted a stray horse, his side dark with crimson, and turned toward the horizon. Without farewell, he rode slow, fading into the dust, a figure more spirit than man. The canyon lay silent but for the wind, carrying away the echoes of gunfire, the prayers of a child, and the footsteps of a preacher who once ran from his past, but now rode into it. And so I leave you with this. When you see a lone rider vanish into the sunrise, ask yourself, was it mercy that passed your way, or a ghost of judgment wearing a rancher's face?